Well. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you're at on this fine planet. This is the effing expert, Mr. Isaacs, and you are watching a very special edition of the Magic of Wrestling podcast. In turn, let's go ahead and get going. All right, everybody. This is the Magic of Wrestling podcast, episode number 80. Can you believe that there's been 80 of these things? And I am your host, the effing expert, Mr. Isaacs. Mr. Wakeland is on assignment this week, and it's a very special assignment, and it's one that we take very, very seriously here. He has been tasked with sitting down with the brand new monarch of the UK. Yes, King Charles. Our Liam Wakeland, the magician, is going to Buckingham Palace to meet with King Charles. He's going to discuss a myriad of issues. He's going to talk about world of sport wrestling. But his main reason for going, and I do have to disclose this, is that he is going to try to convince His Majesty to knight Grado. This is very near and dear to Mr. Wakeland's heart. He is going to teach him some magic tricks too. He's going to show him some card tricks or whatever. But yeah, he wants Grado to become a knight. And I think this is a very worthwhile endeavor. And I wish Mr. Wakeland the best of luck. I think he had a little bit of problems this morning getting in. The guards with the funny hats at Buckingham Palace, I think, was giving him some shit. But to my understanding, he just choke slammed him and walked on through. So that's what Mr. Wakeland's doing. Next week, expect a full, detailed report on his sit down with King Charles. And I look forward to hearing that. And that's going to be very interesting. Let's see who we've got in the house here today. We have Joseph Graham. What is up, Mr. Isaacs? Golden Graham, the serial killer. I'm glad to see you here, my friend. Good old effing wrestling. Sir Grado. Yeah, I mean, it just, the gimmick writes itself, right? You know, you unite Grado, and then he comes out and he's wearing like medieval armor, and he's carrying the sword, and he's still coming out to the stupid Celine Dion song. I mean, this writes itself. I mean, come on. Let's do it. Let's go for it. Get me in touch with Grado. I'll give him ideas. Where's the fireplace? Now, I do have a fireplace, believe it or not. It is in my dining room, which is next to my office. And I probably should have moved my laptop in there, and I could have actually started the fireplace up. But this is the middle of summer, so I think it would have gotten a little bit warm. So I didn't want to go that direction because it gets pretty hot pretty fast in here. But this is the Fireside Chat with the effing expert. And for those of you who don't know what the term Fireside Chat is referring to, the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, used to give a weekly radio address to the nation. He was the first president to ever be on radio in the airwaves here in the country. And he gave a weekly radio address, and he called it a fireside chat. So he sat in front of the fireplace at the White House in his wheelchair because he had polio, and he did a weekly radio address to the nation. Fireside Chat with the president. This is Fireside Chat with the effing expert, Mr. Isaacs. It is an uncensored, unvarnished view of my reality, my views of professional wrestling, my views of life. Anything you want to talk about, you can throw it in the chat. I promise I'll get to it. If I'm in the middle of talking about something, I promise I'll come back to it. But this is something I've kind of been interested in doing for a while because you know, I love the work that I've done here with effing wrestling. I'm very happy that Liam brought me into the fold here. And Canada Dry, Aaron, effing wrestling, where he goes by these days, gave me this platform. to come on and speak about my love of professional wrestling, and it's something I've thoroughly enjoyed every week since I've been doing this, and I've been doing this probably for about a year or a little more at this point. I think I started regularly working with Liam about April of last year, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm thankful that these two men have given me a platform to come on here and just talk about something I love. I love pro wrestling, the irreverent, crazy world of professional wrestling. And it's been a lot of fun. And, I look forward to many future shows. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Effing Wrestling, or excuse me, Joe Graham says, what's your opinion on Tennessee? I really like Tennessee. If we're talking about Tennessee volunteer sports, nah, I don't like them at all. I'm a Kentucky Wildcat through and through. But at the same time, I do like the state of Tennessee in general. They don't have an income tax. They've just got a sales tax. It'd probably be a nice place to live. I've gone with the family down to Gatlinburg, Tennessee a few times, saw the real Dollywood, which is a real place. For those of you international listeners, I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's a theme park owned by country music singer Dolly Parton. It's a lot of fun. Gatlinburg is a great place to go and take a family. It's almost kind of like Las Vegas of the South, right? There's a lot of little novelty places and just it's very interesting. They've got, a strip kind of like in Vegas where you could just find a whole bunch of just interesting shit, cool things. A lot of good family attractions, a lot of good adult attractions. It's just nice. Effin Wrestling says, what thing as a child made you gag? Probably whenever you were sitting in a classroom and like a kid vomits on the floor and then they bring in that orange powder. The orange powder they'd bring in and sprinkle over the vomit chunks and then they would just sweep it up. Yeah, that made me gag as a child. Joe Graham, who is the best wrestler to come out of Kentucky in your opinion? Oh, yeah, it's the Macho Man Randy Savage, who was from Lexington, Kentucky. He was in the ICW promotion that his family, the Poffos, had here in Kentucky. They ran some shows here in my hometown, which is where Miss Elizabeth is from. And they were based out of Lexington. So Macho Man Randy Savage, definitely. So you've been inside Dollywood? Yes, I have. I rode the roller coaster, and it was a lot of fun. And I was a kid. Might be a little scandalous, but yeah, I was a kid. But yeah, Dollywood's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Good theme park. Get your mind out of the gutter, effing wrestling. So this is going to be kind of a little bit of a different show. I know usually when we do these shows on here, it's done as almost kind of like an ESPN type format. There's a lot of graphics. It's segmented. There's like 3 or 4 panelists or what have you. This is going to be a little more kind of like a talk radio type format, like a solo podcaster format, where I'm just going to kind of ramble for a considerable amount of time about whatever comes in my brain. And yeah, I will answer your questions. I've got a list of things here I kind of want to address as well. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to do, just to get this part out of the way, because we've got to do it. This is very important. I want to talk about, if I can find the graphic here, Dubby. Dubby is an energy drink that is designed for streamers, gamers, podcasters, but you can also use it if you're just working in the office and you have a hard day. You need a little bit of a pick-me-up. You need your brain to be firing on all cylinders, if I can talk correctly. I probably need some Dubby myself at this point. Get Dubby. Be better. Jitterless energy blend. They don't have any of those fake artificial ingredients that other energy drinks have. My understanding is that King Charles is a big fan of the Dubby, and Liam was going to take him a batch of it as he went for the interview. So that's Effin Wrestling. You can use code Effin Wrestling at dubby.gg to get 10% off of your order. And if you do that, you're supporting the program. So please do it. Get some Dubby and check it out, guys. We got Caleb in the house. Caleb Vlogs, World of Down Syndrome. What is up, man? How you doing? I am so glad to see you here. Drinking Dubby at the gym. Wow. Okay. Well, I think it'd probably be best if you drank W before you went to the gym because it'll give you that rush of energy. And then you can go and you can deadlift 500 pounds, which I'm sure you probably can. And yeah, it'll maximize your performance, whether you're working out, working behind a desk, whatever you want to do, man. Whatever you want to do. And I do have to admit that we are streaming live on Twitch right now as well. Uh, for those of you who don't know, I think Aaron announced it the other night. I am running the FN Wrestling Twitch account. So twitch.tv/FN Wrestling. This is just kind of like a little pilot program that I'm throwing on there as well. So we're simulcasting there. So if you've got Twitch, feel free to pull it up and give me a view, give me a follow. I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to be playing video games on there quite a bit, mostly Call of Duty. But eventually, when AEW Fight Forever comes out, which apparently is coming out, they're not kicking the can down the road on this anymore. When it does come out, I am going to play it and I'm going to stream it. Now, what I hope is that I can get some fellow members of the FN Wrestling community to come and play with me. I would love to have a Call of Duty squad. We could call ourselves FN Wrestling, put it in our titles. I think that would be a lot of fun. But Fight Forever is something I'm definitely going to do. I'm hoping that Caleb and Aaron and some of those guys will get Fight Forever and jump in the ring with me. I'd love to slam you guys through a flaming table and wrap barbed wire around your head. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I really do. FN Wrestling, are you seeing Haney's comment? Now, I think you're messing with me. No, I don't see a comment from Haney. But I promise you, if Haney comes in and he wants to say something, I will address his comment. We share my channel about my WWE vlogs. Sure. You know, give my man Caleb a follow here if you don't already. I will give you a follow, Caleb, as soon as we're done here. I promise you. So next Thursday, I'm going to do another solo show. This one is going to be, I guess you can call it Magic of Wrestling, but I think I'm going to call my solo shows Eye on Wrestling. And I have a special guest that I'm going to have on. He's my friend. His name is Tim Epperson. Now, you guys will know Tim from the viral photo of MJF having hit a kid in the groin and taking a picture with him and his dad. Now, the dad is my friend Tim. So he kind of went viral for this. The picture was floating around. I know we've shared it on FN Wrestling. Fightful got in contact with him. He's kind of made the rounds here, but he hasn't actually done a podcast before. So being that he's a buddy of mine, I reached out to him. I tried to get him for today. He was out of town, so we made a special arrangement that I'm going to do a special Thursday show next Thursday night at 8 p.m. I'll be talking to Tim. Now, Tim is a lifelong wrestling fan. I've actually gone to a wrestling show with him. I went to a WWE house show with him about 20 years ago. And we'll discuss that. We'll talk about wrestling. We'll talk about meeting MJF. I'm kind of curious to pick his brain about what it was like meeting MJF in person, get full details on their interaction, how he acted. Obviously, he stays kayfabe the entire time. So I think that'll be a fascinating conversation. And I look forward to having him on. I hope you guys will all join me as well. Haney, your comment was blocked by YouTube for some reason. Yeah, whatever. Haney says, but you can see it. I can see that. Yes. I saw it and tried to show it. Okay, you guys are just doing your own little shtick here in the chat. And that's all good, man. That is all good. So the first story that I kind of wanted to get into that I thought was fascinating. I thought that you guys might get a kick out of this. If you're not familiar with Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, like she's kind of a far right wing kind of lunatic from Colorado, a Republican. Very fringe, very on the far right. Kind of makes some outlandish, crazy statements. Her mother claimed that her biological father was none other than Sweet Stan Lane of the Midnight Express. Joe Graham says, "Oh God, just ignore her." I'm sorry, the story is just too funny not to share. It's too funny not to share. Uh, so yeah. Anyways, apparently Lauren Boebert's mother had been telling her for years that Sweet Stan Lane was her father, and apparently it even got to the point to where Stan Lane took a paternity test sometime back in like the early '90s, and it was found that he was not the father, but she still didn't believe it. She made accusations that he knew somebody that worked for the tester and had tampered with the test to make it erroneously show him negative as the father. So this has been kind of a story that's been floating out there. I think about a year ago, it first came out. I think, I don't know if it was David Bixenspan that reported it about a year ago, but it became this big thing, right? This big thing that Stan Lane might have fathered this crazy far right congresswoman and didn't know about it. Well, according to the dailybeast.com, for years, Representative Lauren Boebert's mother has maintained that a retired professional wrestler named Stan Lane, with whom she had a fling in the 1980s, was the congresswoman's biological father. A court-ordered paternity test completed decades ago showed that, in fact, Lane was not the dad, but some doubts on the Boebert side of things persisted because this lab worker who took Lane's blood sample was later convicted of taking a bribe to switch vials in another case. So what happened here was that apparently, I don't know if she reached out to Stan Lane or what, but the results are in. Boebert 36 said the DNA analysis shows that Lane 69 still is not her father. So miraculously, over the past 30 years, he did not develop into being her father. So, I mean, that pretty fascinating stuff there. But this is just so crazy. This is crazy. This is 2023. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on in the world. Who would have thought that a far right lunatic who somehow made it to Congress would be claiming that a wrestling legend was her father? This really kind of seems like a scene from the movie Idiocracy. I don't know if any of you have seen that or not, but I believe in that movie, there's a guy in it who's like a professional wrestler. I think they call him the SmackDown World Champion, and Cruz, and he ends up being president of the United States. That's not too far fetched at this point. It's really not. I could see this legitimately happening. But this is just this is the problem with what's going on in this country right now is we are sending people to the Capitol. This is not a political show, but we're sending people to the Capitol that just have no business there. They don't. And I empathize with Congresswoman Boebert. I don't agree with her politically. I think she's an absolute nutcase. But at the same time, I do empathize with not knowing who your father is. Because, I mean, that's a terrible thing. To grow up and not know who your father is. You know, the old went out for cigarettes and never came back, or just never even knew they existed in her case. That's a sad thing. So, I mean, we can joke about her, but I don't want to make light of the situation because that's a very serious thing. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. F and Wrestling says Bret Hart is my father. You wish Bret Hart was your father. He might as well be, though, because he is on your brain all the time. He is the greatest wrestler of all time. But, you know, Aaron sleeps, eats, and drinks Bret Hart every single day. Joe Graham, well, we know where Lauren Boebert gets it from. She's a wild woman, man. She barely won re-election this past cycle. You know, I don't think she's going to make it around too much longer. So enjoy the spectacle while you can, sweetheart. The best movie? What movie are we talking about here? I think I must have missed that. Hi, F an expert. I got a big boil on my arse. How do I treat it? And do you need a pick to give treatment plan? Now it's funny to me that so Europeans like to use arse instead of ass, right? Now, is that primarily like a Scottish thing? Or I think Liam says arse. So I don't know if it's just like all of the countries that comprise the UK, or if it's kind of all through Europe. If you have a big boil on your arse, I would strongly suggest seeing a dermatologist because I am an expert. I'm an expert in all things wrestling, right? I am an effing expert of effing wrestling. I don't know if I'm really qualified to treat a boil. I would imagine that would be pretty hard to sit. So I think I would go. You're probably going to have the deal where they either burn it off or they kind of like take the scalpel and just slice it off. And do you need a pick to give a treatment plan? Not to me, no. But you need to take that to your dermatologist and show it to them. In fact, they'll probably just have you drop your pants and check. Caleb, don't get too excited. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would go and I would have that professionally checked out, man, because that shit can get infected. And if that gets infected, that's going to be very, very painful. You're going to have a hard time sitting on your arse if you even have an arse after that. You might have to have your arse amputated at that point because infection's no joke, man. You get an infection set up and you might lose it, bro. You might lose it. All right. So as we all know, AEW is starting a new show next weekend, and we're going to have a new show here on Effin' Wrestling as well. Obviously, we're talking about Collision, and there's going to be Collision After Dark, of which I'm going to be a panelist. That should be very exciting. I kind of wanted to just kind of get into my thoughts on Collision and kind of what I think they should do. Effin' Wrestling says movie. I mean, it was Idiocracy. Yes, that is a great movie. And what was sad about it at the time was that when it came out, it didn't get a wide distribution deal because they'd said that the test screeners that watched it didn't understand the jokes. Yeah. But yeah, Collision starts next weekend. Obviously, it's been announced that CM Punk is going to be in the main event. You know, I do think it's kind of funny that they've kind of like created this alternate show where like the people that don't get along with the elite are going to go. I do think that's pretty funny. I think that Collision needs to be kind of more like, and I know I touched on this in a previous episode, but Collision needs to be more like the Puro kind of show, right? It needs to be more kind of the New Japan, kind of old school Ring of Honor influence, less like high flying, high spots, crazy stuff, wearing cosplay uniforms, comedy gags. Like it needs to be less of that. And it needs to be a little more of like a realistic view of professional wrestling. Kind of an old school Puro vision of professional wrestling. I think Collision's the show that like should have more of the New Japan collaboration. And I think that Dynamite should be more of that PWG style show that the Young Bucks want it to be. You know, Excalibur and the Young Bucks and those guys ran Pro Wrestling Guerrilla back in the early 2010s to a lot of success. They kind of took the formula of the old WCW Cruiserweight division back in the late 90s and kind of shaped and molded a new indie culture style that eventually kind of culminated into PWG and a bunch of other organizations. So that's kind of what they want to book pro wrestling as. They want it to be a lot of high flying. They want it to be comedy spots, very, very lighthearted, that kind of like Chikara kind of stuff. You know, a lot of comic book influence, video game influence. So I think that's best suited for Dynamite, and Collision needs to be the more pure show of the two. And I think it would be interesting to have two diametrically different philosophical views and presentations of pro wrestling. Now, I'm hoping that Collision has a totally different set, different graphics and everything. I would imagine it's probably going to look a lot like Dynamite, just with a different logo. But I would like to see a completely different setup. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's what I'm hoping for. Welcome to Costco. I love you. All right. Joe Graham says, I hope Kenta shows up to cost Punk and set up a match for Forbidden Door. Yes. I think for years we should see, for years I've wanted to see Punk and Kenta just because, you know, they both do the go to sleep. And, I know Kenta's kind of ribbed him a little bit about stealing that move from him. I would like to see that. I think that would be a really good feud. I think Kenta's a great heel. I'd love to see him show up and attack Punk and see what Punk has to say. And then they could, mix it up. They would have a great match together. They would. I mean, they're both older. They're both a little more physically limited than what they used to be, but they both really have a thorough understanding of in-ring psychology. So I think they would work really well together, and I would love to see it. Collision should be like when SmackDown had the SmackDown 6. Yeah. There was a period of time where SmackDown felt diametrically different than Raw. And I think that's what it should be like here. I think these shows should feel different. Because if they're not different, then what's the point? They need to have a different feel. I am a little worried about them going on Saturday nights because they're going to have a lot to compete with. Practically every sporting event on earth runs Saturday nights. It's going to be really hard for them, but I hope so. Water grows plants. It's not just water, though, effing wrestling. You got to have love. You got to have love. You got to have sunshine. You got to really nurture the buds that are growing. You've got to put some heart into it, man. Some heart and some soul. And you got to talk to it. You got to sing to it and help it grow. That's what you got to do. So, like I said, we're doing the post show, and I'm going to be a panelist on that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping that these shows are better than some of the shows I've reviewed on Dynamite, which some of them have been great. I'm a little bit of a harsh reviewer compared to some of the other panelists on the show. Like, to me, something has got to be like world beating, once in a lifetime type show to get like a 4 or 5 bell. So like usually for me, it's lingers somewhere between 2 and 3 bells. And I just don't think that there are many wrestling shows out there that would warrant a 4 or 5 bell rating from me. Now I'm hoping Collision changes that. Water like in the toilet. Sure. Now, if you think about it, when plants are watered in nature, they are watered by rain, right? And rain is condensation that comes from lakes and rivers and various bodies of water, which undoubtedly has excrement and urine in it. So that air gets vaporized, absorbed into the clouds, mixed around, turned to rain droplets, which then comes down and waters the plants. So, technically, yes, toilet water can be of the same composition as natural rainwater. Mr. Isaacs, we need to do an experiment where we grow plants and you talk to one set, not the other. I think that's a good idea. I think that I should talk to one, and I think that Aaron should talk to the other, and we'll see whose voice can grow the bigger plant. I think that's a good experiment to run. These are quotes from the movie Come On. I haven't seen the movie since it first came out, so I don't really remember a lot of quotes from it. I do think, didn't they like pour energy drinks on the grass or something to try to get them to grow faster? Which is absolutely ridiculous. But moving on here, I saw some footage this week, and I don't know if you did or not. If you haven't, I would suggest checking it out. Samoa Joe is going to be in the new Twisted Metal show, for any of you who didn't know. And what Twisted Metal is, it's a game franchise from the original PlayStation where you get in a vehicle. The vehicle's armed with a lot of weaponry and armor and missiles and that kind of shit. And you drive around and blow each other up. It was a phenomenal series that for some reason they just quit making at some point. But for some reason, Amazon's making a TV show about this. And some footage came out this week of Samoa Joe playing the character of Sweet Tooth. Now, Sweet Tooth was the ice cream truck, and he had a big evil clown head on top of the ice cream truck. Now, him playing Sweet Tooth, he's got the weird clown mask with the flames on the head and everything. And there's a clip of him beating up Falcon from the Avengers. I don't know what his character is on the particular show, but that's what he played in the MCU. He was Falcon. And he's beating Falcon up. It looks like he's fighting him in a casino or something like that. And as he's like strangling him. He's singing like the thong song by Cisco. Which, if you haven't seen this, you should see it. I mean, obviously, I don't think I can play a clip of it here, or we might get banned. But I would highly recommend checking that out because Samoa Joe has got some comedic timing here. You know, he might have a future as an actor, which, I mean, you know, he's about to age out of professional wrestling. He's had a lot of injury issues, but he's got a great personality, though. He's got a great personality. Haney wants to know who is my favorite monkey. I never listened to the Monkees. Couldn't tell you. I don't know. Who's your favorite monkey, Alec Haney? I'd be curious to know that. But yeah, I don't know why they haven't made any more Twisted Metal games because I thought they were great. I hope maybe this will revitalize the franchise. And, you know, if they put out another one, I will stream it on the Effin' Wrestling channel and we'll go from there. You know, speaking of games, like I said, I'm going to try to stream Fight Forever. I hope that Fight Forever lives up to the expectation here because, I mean, obviously they've set quite an expectation where they've kicked the can down the road like 100 times. I hope they're perfecting this thing. I do. I've seen some clips of it. It looks pretty wild. It looks over the top. Obviously, you know, women can wrestle men. There's flaming tables. There's a tennis racket, which I think is kind of funny. I'm sure Cornette will love that. It looks very wild and over the top, and it kind of has that old No Mercy WrestleMania 2000 kind of aesthetic to it. And I just hope that they can pull it off because, I mean, that's a pretty dated, pretty old look and pretty old engine. So I'm hoping that in 2023, they can pull it off and kind of modernize it and make it not seem like just kind of a cheap throwback nostalgia product that someone's going to play twice and then throw away. I do think those games in general were a lot better than the WWE series. The WWE 2K series, I think, has gotten a little stagnant for me. I liked them up until probably a few years ago. And then it's just like, it's kind of like every other like sports franchise game, like Madden or, NBA 2K or whatever. It's like they just rehash the same game over and over and over. They'll put a little bit of lipstick on it, gloss it up a little. But it's essentially the same game every single year. And that's the case with the 2K series. It's gotten so stale. Now, I haven't played the current one. I got last year's. And I fall into the trap I usually do when it comes to these sports franchises is I'll buy the game, I'll play it twice, and then I kind of shelve it and I don't play it again. At least they brought back my GM mode. Yes, the GM mode was very, very popular back in the day. And I know a lot of streamers kind of like they build these big elaborate leagues with their own characters and they run storylines and some of them even stream it on Twitch. I mean, it's like a big thing. I mean, we should do that with AFW. We should. And in fact, when I get Fight Forever, I don't know if you can make your own guys in Fight Forever or not. I think you can. I'm going to make characters of all the podcast hosts here at Effin' Wrestling. And we're going to have some matches. And I'm going to run these matches either as a simulation or actually play them. And if Aaron is cool with doing so, I will upload those to the Effin' Wrestling YouTube channel. So if you want to watch The Magician choke slam Canada Dry or Canada Dry lock on the sharpshooter and get a submission victory, you can see that coming soon on Effin' Wrestling YouTube. Joe Graham says 2K23 GM mode is fun. I play with my son. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't tried 2K23 yet. I had 2K22, and it was all right. If I could find 2K23 on sale, I'll probably get it. Do you have a PS5 or an Xbox? I have an Xbox Series S, and I have a gaming PC. So the computer that I'm using here, I have a GeForce RTX 2050 or 2080 laptop. So I use that for my gaming mostly now. Before, I used the Xbox Series S and I ran it through a capture card, and that's how I did my Twitch streams. But now I've got a gaming laptop. I just play directly on the laptop at this point. It's so much better. It's graphically a lot more powerful than the Xbox too. Effing wrestling, I want to see the Enlightened one. You know, if there's a mask in the game that looks a lot like the Enlightened one, I will create the Enlightened one. Definitely. I'll create JFB. I'll create Canada Dry. I'll create Liam. I'll create myself. I'll create Joe Graham, Trey J, you know, all you guys, the Enlightened one. I will make a character for all you guys. It would be great if I could make a character for almost everybody in AFW. Now, I know that'd be hard to do, and then put them in a big battle royale and put it on the channel and see who the computer thinks would win a battle royale of all AFW participants. I think that would be pretty amusing. I do. But yeah, I've got high hopes for Fight Forever. And I, like I said, I want you guys to come in and play with me too. I want you guys to come in. One thing that kind of caught my eye this week, and I know I'm jumping around a lot here, so feel free to chime in with whatever you want to talk about. But one thing that really caught my eye this week was I know we mentioned Ryback, I think, a week or two ago on the show, and you know how he's always complaining about being shadow banned and all this and that. Well, now Ryback has started a feud with Booker T. Now, Booker T is another guy who's I don't find to be incredibly likable either, if I'm just being honest. So it's kind of funny that these two started having a spat with each other. I think I have some comments here that Booker T said about Ryback. This is from WrestlingInc.com. The Twitter spat seems to be caused by recent comments from Booker T, with the Hall of Famer saying that Ryback talks like someone who has been in the business a lot longer than he actually has been. Booker T also questioned Ryback's frequent criticism of WWE and his lack of wrestling appearances elsewhere. The comments aren't exactly new, with Booker T having previously been very open about his lack of respect for Ryback. So Ryback is just, I really do think he's kind of become the Ultimate Warrior 2.0, but I don't think he's as talented as the Ultimate Warrior, if you want me to be honest. I think he's somebody that I used to kind of like. I used to kind of like Ryback. I listened to his podcast when it first started with Pat Buck. It seems like he kind of has a hard time maintaining friends because he fell out of favor with Pat Buck. He disappeared from the show. He had some porn chick on for a little while. They kind of fell out of favor. She quit hosting. He had like Raj Giri or Ryan Satin, I think, was on there for a little while. Now, eventually, it's literally just him talking into the top of his side address microphone, so it sounds like shit. You know, he's got like a Blue Yeti that you're supposed to talk into the side of, but he's like tilted it and talking into the top of it, like I am my microphone here, which mine's designed that way. His is not. So his podcast sounds like shit. And he just goes on there constantly and complains about how the WWE's got this conspiracy and they're trying to suppress him. And he's made some awful comments about how like the world will be better when Vince McMahon's dead. I think he said the same thing about Dave Meltzer. I mean, just really just off the wall stuff, vaccine skepticism. He had a period of time where he was like a vegetarian, and then now I guess he's back to eating meat. And it just, I don't know. The guy's out there, man. I mean, I wish him well, but like, I think sometimes he needs to reel it in and just kind of shut up because he just says the most asinine things. And Booker T, like I said, I don't think he's an incredibly likable person either. I think he's a bit full of himself. I think he thinks he's a lot more of a legend than he actually is. I know he's the four-time WCW champion, but I mean, come on, you know, he was WCW champion, whatever. Hogan was gone and everybody had pretty much washed out at that point. And I mean, he was a decent champion. He's a good worker. He was a good wrestler. I just don't think he's like the world beater that he thought he was. But I think this is interesting, though. I'm curious to see where this goes. Apparently, Booker T wanted to have Ryback on his podcast to debate him and argue with him. And Ryback had ridiculous demands, quote unquote. And then he counter offered and wants Booker T to come on his show. It's just, I don't know. It's weird stuff. Ryback had his weird spat with Mark Henry a couple of years ago that was very similar to this. And I don't know, man. I'm curious to see where this goes. I would like to see them sit down and talk and like just have a full scale argument because I think it'd be very entertaining. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It would be a hell of a lot more fun than a Danny Burch interview. I can tell you that. But yeah, I would love to see it. Ryback is just full of himself. He puts out these polls all the time. Where would you like to see me go? Would you like to see me go to AEW or WWE or Impact? Or do you want me to retire? And of course, retire wins every single time. And Evan Wrestling says, would Impact take him? I don't think so, because I think he would demand too much money. I think Impact would take him if he was willing to take a reasonable salary. But I think this guy thinks he's an enormous star. I think he thinks he's $1 million talent. And I think that unless somebody pays him that amount of money, I don't think he's going to go there. Like, I know that it was reported a few years back that New Japan had made him an offer, and he counter offered with something that was way above what they were willing to pay. So they told him to get lost. You know, he thinks he's this big star for some reason. And I kind of agree with what Booker T says. Booker T says he acts like a guy that's been in the business for decades. He does. He's a guy who had a great look, great aesthetic. You know, he went to, the Deep South, I think, is where he did his developmental stint, and then in NXT, and he went to the main roster, WWE. And I mean, he had a decent little run for, a little over half a decade or something. But I mean, when you hear the guy speak, you would think that he's been a pro wrestler for like 40 years. I mean, he just has that kind of vibe about him. Alec Haney says, have you ever seen the rain? I see the rain far too often because it rains here way too much. Now, it looks like this summer is going to be a little more dry. But I know a couple summers that we've had, the past couple, have just been very, very rainy. I know we've got some rain coming next week. I like the Creedence Clearwater Revival thing that you're going for there. It is a great song. Unfortunately, it is really going to rain here in a few days, and I don't like it. Send them to the NWA. NWA can't afford them. Now, I actually think NWA would fit his aesthetic a lot more. Because Billy Corgan has that kind of old school 70s, 80s, let's put a big guy out there, a big jacked guy. He's got Tyrus as his champion, who would not be a champion anywhere ever other than the NWA. And honestly, I think the only reason why Billy Corgan made Tyrus champion is because he has that stint on Fox News. I don't know how, but somehow he finagled himself into making regular appearances on Fox News with Greg Gutfeld and, espousing typical, I'm a common sense right winger, that kind of crap. So he's on Fox News all the time, and now he carries the 10 pounds of gold with him every time he's on there. And I think Billy Corgan thinks that that's going to get people to tune into NWA. Now, whether it's working or not, I don't know. Obviously, Billy Corgan would have to share the numbers about whether or not that's increasing anything. But I don't think so. I think Ryback would fit in well there just because he's kind of a similar guy to Tyrus. He's another big guy. I could see them putting the title on him and putting him on Fox News because he has a lot of the same goofy opinions that Tyrus does. I could see it. But Billy Corgan is not going to be able to afford Ryback because Ryback is going to want the kind of money of like all the rest of the roster salary combined. So I don't think that's going to happen. Haney says, there is a person in the AFW chat. Let's call him Caleb to protect his identity. But he is always picking on me. I have admin rights. Should I kick him? And I'm curious if this individual, does he have a proclivity for telling other members not to wear pants? Because if so, then what I would suggest you do is to get another admin to be an independent arbiter in the case and to come in and take a look. Do an independent review and analysis of what this Caleb gentleman, since we're not using his real name, what this Caleb gentleman has been doing in the AFW chat. Because if we do have a guy in there that is constantly telling people to take their pants off, that could be a problem. Because there might be some people that have problems. And I don't wear pants around the house a lot anyways. But maybe Alec Haney wants to wear pants around the house. Maybe he does. And if he does, then we need an investigation here, but we need an independent arbiter. I think you shouldn't kick him. You should get another admin to come in and review the case. Maybe we can even have AFW court. We can have a separate chat room where one of us show up as a judge, have some jurors. You and Caleb can state your cases, and then the independent panel will decide whether or not he should stay in the chat. I think that's the best way to go about it. Booker is a B grade wrestling legend. I agree. And again, I kind of prefer Booker T as Harlem Heat with his brother. As opposed to a singles wrestler. I mean, he had a good singles run, but like I said, he's just it got to the point to where at the end of WCW and he first came into WWE, he was kind of like Diet Rock, right? Like he was doing the thing where he wore the shiny shirts and the gold chains around his neck and the fancy sunglasses, and he was kind of trying to be the Rock. He even did the bookend, which is basically the rock bottom. So he did that in WCW. But then when he got to WWE, I felt like he kind of struggled with his identity for a while. I mean, until they started making him heel and he grew out the dreads and he did the King Booker stick and all that. He kind of came into his own at that point. But I never saw Booker T as really that great. I think the best thing that he did in the ring as a solo wrestler was, and this is a deep cut. I don't know if anybody remembers this or not, but he had a best of 7 series in WCW for the WCW television title. And it was Booker T and a best of 7 series against Chris Benoit. And it happened across Nitro and WCW Saturday Night. I don't think Thunder was a thing yet at that point. But of course, it went the whole 7 matches. I think Booker T ended up winning the thing, but that was a great series of matches. Now, of course, Benoit could have wrestled a broomstick and put on a great match. But to me, that was the best in-ring work that I ever saw from Booker T. Joseph Graham says that series was great. I'm glad somebody remembers that, because I think that's the best in-ring work that Booker T has done as a singles wrestler. Alec Haney, exactly. I don't want to take them off. I have an R spoil. Yeah, I mean, if you have an R spoil, you really need to keep the pants on, because you don't want to expose it to contagions that could possibly cause sepsis to set in. You don't want to get an infection, because like I said, we don't want to amputate your R's. You need to have an R's. It's important, because otherwise you're going to have to stand up all the time. And who wants to do that? This looks like a job for Canada Dry. If Canada Dry can be impartial here, then yeah, absolutely. I don't have any mod or admin power in either of the chats, so it can't be me. Everybody else has power but me for some reason. I don't. But yeah, Canada Dry, I think, could be the independent arbiter here. I almost think there should be a panel. It should almost be like the Supreme Court. Maybe we should have 9. We should have 9 AFW justices that come in and review the case and then can vote. And, if the majority agree, then, we boot Caleb. This individual called Caleb, it's a moniker. It's not anybody real. Or, if Alec Haney wins, we'll get this guy out of here. If Alec Haney loses, then he's just going to have to deal with it. I'm sorry, but I don't recommend taking your pants off, though. I really don't, especially if you got a boil in your arse. Sounds like a job for F and wrestling security. Is that the F and social security, which would be you and Rich Southwood, I guess? No, because I give up power that way. See, that's the problem. That's the problem, Canada Dry. You're a power-hungry individual. You want to control everything. But you know what? Sometimes that works, though. Sometimes that dictatorship works. So, I mean, I guess if you feel like you could be fully independent and true to the law of AFW, then sure, have at it. I'd be curious to see what happens. But this Caleb individual, I think, needs to be brought to justice. I really do. Wow, that took us in a really, really weird direction. But like I said, I am simulcasting this on Twitch, twitch.tv/effing wrestling. I haven't seen anybody pop up from Twitch yet, but I'm hoping that we get some new subscribers. Effing wrestling says PCB. Now, I know what the C and B stands for, but what does the P stand for? I've seen him referred to that way, but what does that mean? Can you explain that one to me? But yeah, we are simulcasting this on Twitch. I am running the effing wrestling Twitch, and so I'm hoping that we get some followers over there as well. Bring them into the fold here at effing wrestling. I guess at this point, Joseph Graham says professor, so he's a professor. What is he a professor of? I'd like to know that. Like, does he have a doctorate degree? Does he have a PhD in something? Like, what's the deal here? Caleb, if you were in the chat, tell me what you were a professor of. Now, is it kind of like Professor Chaos? I know that was kind of that was Michael Smith's gimmick, right? He had a character that was kind of like Professor Chaos. So I don't think he's Professor Chaos, but what is he a professor of? I would like to think that Caleb is a professor of political science. That's what I would like to think. That's what I have a degree in. I have a degree in political science and a degree in history. So I could see Caleb educating people about the finer points of politics. Alec Haney, he was a pants tailor. Is that why he's always wanting you to take your pants off? Is he wanting to measure the pants to make sure that it's the appropriate length? Is that what it is? Which, that would make total sense. Because, you got to have proper fitting pants. If you don't have proper fitting pants, then you're just going to be like falling over yourself, right? You're going to be walking around trying to do business, and you're just going to fall on your arse. Because if you don't have properly fitting pants, that's a real problem. It gets tucked underneath your shoe, and you just lose it. You lose all dexterity. You lose the ability to stand. And we've got to be able to stand up, guys. He sounds like a comic villain. Yeah, he does. I think that he fashions himself as a hero, but he does sound like a comic villain. He's a pants thief, and he's a professor. Those two things just flow together as an evil villain. All right, well, I think we need to go ahead and kind of wrap this up here a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about the show that's going to happen tomorrow with effing wrestling. The mainline show here on the channel, they are going to have a what if episode. Now look at this banner. They've got Magnum TA, they've got Owen Hart, and of course they got Goldberg kicking Brett. Like that, that's always got to come up on the shows here. I think that's going to be fascinating to hear the thoughts of the panel of what if some of these things did or did not happen. And I saw people debating this online, I think a couple days ago, about Magnum TA because his episode of Dark Side of the Ring aired. And the debate was, if Magnum TA had not had his car crash, which ended his career, would Sting have been a prominent star in the late NWA, early WCW, or would Magnum TA have had a long-running feud with Flair through the early 90s? And I think that's a very interesting question I'd like to hear the panel discuss. Effing wrestling, what number am I thinking of? Probably 69. I think that's probably the number you're thinking of. But yeah, tune in tomorrow for that. The what if, it's interesting. Obviously, I've talked about the Goldberg Bret Hart one before. I think if Goldberg hadn't injured Bret Hart, I think Bret would have wrestled another decade into the Ruthless Aggression era, and I think we could have seen some of the best work of his career. And that's a real shame that we were deprived of that. And we had Owen Hart there as well. Presumably, it's going to be what if Owen didn't have his tragic fall. I don't know. I would like to think that Owen would have went on, had some of the best matches of his career into like the Ruthless Aggression era, and probably had a little stint as WWE champion. I think that's very realistic. I think that could have happened. And I wish I would have. I do. No, 3. What, you looking for a 3 count here? Is that what it is? I know we were talking about 3 count like a week or so ago. You've got that song stuck in your head, right? Is that what it is? The 3 count song? You need to see if we can license the 3 count song. I don't know if you need to get in touch with Jimmy Hart or who owns the rights to that. I know Jimmy Hart did a lot of WCW's music. Get in touch with Jimmy Hart and see if we can get the rights to the 3 count music, because I would like to play that on the show. Alec Haney. Do you think Mankind landed on the moon? When The Undertaker threw Mankind off the cage, he threw him down. Now, if he had thrown him up, then the trajectory might have been such that he had been launched into orbit and he might have landed on the moon at that point, but he didn't. He was thrown off the cell and he went through a table, which derailed him. So I don't think he ever landed on the moon. I think that if somebody threw him up in the air, I think he would try to catapult himself to the moon just to sell it. But I don't think he ever did it, unfortunately. All right. So, as you know, let's go ahead and wrap this up here. I've got to run out of some shit to talk about. But, we've got a store, prowrestlingtees.com/effing wrestling. You guys know the deal. You know the shtick. You can buy the Magic of Wrestling t-shirt by Dollywood. I know we discussed the theme park Dollywood earlier. This is Dollywood in the AFW community. You can get her shirt. You can get the shirt of the lovely Natalia Markova. And you can get many other shirts at effing wrestling at prowrestlingtees.com/effing wrestling. We also run the Pro Wrestling Tees shop of Adrian Adonis. You can find t-shirts of the adorable Adrian Adonis at Pro Wrestling Tees/Adrian Adonis. Obviously, he's going to have a Dark Side of the Ring episode this year. I'm pretty excited to see that. I'd like to know more about him because I haven't really seen a whole lot, to be totally honest with you. What's the best type of potato salad? I'm not a fan of potato salad. Sorry. Do you think Grimes has been to the moon? No. I think he's always talking about going to the moon, but I don't think he actually has. I think if he did have to go to the moon, if he was going to, let's say that Cameron Grimes is going to do one of those SpaceX trips, right? Those ones where Elon Musk sends people to the moon, or maybe the Jeff Bezos one where he lets celebrities like pay money and go to the moon with them. If he did that, I would think where he is so hairy that he would probably have to shear himself before he could properly put on the space, the aeronautical equipment required to go to space. I think he would have to shave. I don't know if he'd want to do that because I think that might hurt his aesthetic. It might hurt his gimmick in WWE. So no, I don't think he's been to the moon. William Shatner has been in space. I know Jeff Bezos took him up. So who knows? If Cameron Grimes really did match kayfabe and make a lot of money off that GameStop deal from a couple of years back, then who knows? Maybe he'll have enough money and Bezos will take him to the moon. I think that'd be very interesting. Is the moon hollow? No, the moon's made of cheese. Guys, we all know this. The moon is made of cheese. Just take a big bite out of it. When Liam Wakeling gets really hungry and he decides he has a hankering for some cheese, he catapults himself into the atmosphere and he takes a big bite out of the moon. That's when we get a crescent moon, right? Because he's taken a big chunk of the moon out and eaten it. And then it grows back organically. And then we rinse and repeat the process again. So that's what happens. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. This has been a lot of fun. I know my incoherent rambling here is, I hope it's been entertaining to you. It's been entertaining to me. I may do one of these once in a while, call it Eye on Wrestling, but I don't know. My time is very limited these days, but I do have a lot of fun doing these. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming in and checking us out. Obviously, you can go to effingwrestling.com, scroll all the way down. You can find all of our socials, all of our information. Like I said, twitch.tv/FN Wrestling. You're obviously on the YouTube channel, FNWrestling.com, Pro Wrestling Tees/FN Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Tees/Adrian Adonis. I am Mr. Isaacs. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Isaacs. I try to just post funny shit on there once in a while, punchlines, etc. Joseph Graham says, I've enjoyed the show. FN Wrestling says, good show. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in here. Haney, Caleb, all you guys. I really appreciate you coming in here and hanging out with me today. It's been a lot of fun. And if you're willing to have me back, Aaron, I will do more of these in the future. But right now, I bid you adieu. Goodbye, everybody.
Bear hug. Awesome power. The winners of this bout.
The Magician and the Effin' Expert.
You can win the next round. Go for it.
Don't.
Credo for knighthood. Goodbye.